Hi, I'm Jim with Pour the Juice, and in this video, we're going to be reviewing and scoring Barrell's new batch product, number 37. And if you watch my videos, you know I'm a big Barrell fan. But to be honest, the last Barrell batch that I owned was number 35, and I just thought it was good. I didn't think it was anything fantastic. I've had this for, a week or two now. I've opened it up. I've taken a few tastings over a period of time, and I really think this one's something special. It seems like some other people do as well. So I figured, why not? This is a great time to debut the new PTJ scoring rubric for scoring whiskey. So we'll see how that goes as well. But first, I want to talk a little bit about Barrell number 37, Barrell batch number 37 from Barrell Craft Spirits. This is a blend of Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee whiskeys. And Barrell does a lot of blending with whiskey from those states. You could take a guess where it's from. Most people think MGP, Dickel, and probably Barton, but who knows? The derived mash bill is on the back. One of the things I love about Barrell, very open with what they do. Their mash bill, derived mash bill from all their barrels that they're blending, comes to 78% corn, 18% rye, and 4% malted barley. And the youngest whiskey in the blend is 8 years old. The oldest is 15, and there's, barrels in age all in between. 10 years, 11, 12, 13, 14 years in between that 8 and 15-year whiskey. They don't say how much of each, but from my experience and from my taste so far, I would say that, there's a decent amount of older whiskey in here. Let's get it into the glass. I can't wait. Quite literally every time that I've tasted this, it's gotten better. And maybe what I should do is go over my grading rubric really quick. So I have some main areas in this rubric, and then within those, some of them at least, I've pieced them apart to other points. But essentially, flavor is worth 40% out of the 100% in my rubric. Within flavor, I have 4 different sections. There's just a base flavor, which I call pleasant versus off-putting. A 5 out of 10 on that score would be right in the middle. 10 is, as pleasant as you can get, and a 1 would be as off-putting as you can get. The second category within flavor is intensity. It's also out of 10 points. The next would be finish out of 10 points, and then viscosity out of 10 points as well. So a total of 40 points, 40% of the grade will be due to flavor. Then I have another section for nose, and that's going to be 15 points total for the nose on a whiskey. 10 points of that is going to be, that pleasant versus off-putting, with a 5 right in the middle. And then it's another 5 points, or out of 5 points, for intensity of smell as well. So, there's it could be very off-putting, but also very high intensity. So, a whiskey could, of course, get 5 points on the nose just for being intense. Typically, that doesn't happen. I like the smells of most whiskeys. The next section I have is for value. That's strictly an out of 15 point mark for me. I know that's a little bit odd, but for me, for what I'm grading a whiskey on, value is very important. It's just as important as the nose is, in my opinion. It may be the second most important thing for me in buying a whiskey. Whiskey's expensive these days. I don't like wasting my money. And I think a decent part of this should be whether or not it's a good deal, or whether somebody's trying to rip you off. So that's out of 15 points. Complexity out of 10 points. balance out of 10 points, and uniqueness out of 10 points. And one of these, I can go into a mark off right now. That's going to be value. I think equal value, which would be 7.5 points out of the 15 points here, would be $10 per year, right? For age on a whiskey. I think that's what most people do. And, there's different parts that go into value too. So I have here, $10 per year is one part of a value, whether it's cast strength or whether it's a lower proof, is higher versus low value for me. If something's finished, the value, can be a little bit higher. I'm sure there's other criteria in there that I'm not thinking about off the top of my head, but $10 per year. The lowest aged whiskey in here is 8 years, so that would put it just under that $10 per year mark. Considering it's blended with a lot of older whiskey, I'll keep that right at a base level. It is also cask strength. So, I should probably mention, this is a $89.99 MSRP bottle. So that would be 90. It's an 8-year age statement, essentially. Pretty even value just on age alone for the $10 per year. It's a cask strength product. This is 111.38 proof. It's not finished, but it's excellently blended. I don't think this is a crazy value looking at things aside from the flavor, because I want to keep flavor separate, but just looking at the bottle and what the whiskey is in here, I don't think it's a crazy value. I think it's an above average value for a cask strength product that's been expertly blended from Barrell Craft Spirits. So what I'm going to do with that is, if 7.5 was average for value on this, I'm going to give this a 10.5. All right. So then let's start getting into it a little bit. I guess the other thing I could kind of mark off now is uniqueness and intensity of smell, and pleasant versus off-putting for nose as well. Uniqueness, I think Barrell Craft Spirits is one of the only blenders on the market that tells you exactly what's in the bottle. It's a blender that does, high proof whiskey, cask strength whiskey for almost all of their products. I think that is pretty rare. I think that is fairly unique. I don't think it's as unique as some of their other products. But for a blender to let you know what the derived mash bill is, to tell you all of the whiskey that's in, the blend, age-wise, and the state that it's from, it's fairly rare. And because of that, out of 10 points, I will give it a 7 on uniqueness. Maybe that's a little bit too high. Maybe it should be a 6, but I'm going to give it a 7. For nose intensity, it's fairly intense. Intensity on the nose I have out of 5 points. So you would think a 2.5 would be average. And this is much higher than average. I would say a 3.5 out of 5. It's incredibly pleasant. And I want to preface this. This isn't the best smelling whiskey I've ever smelled, but it's far and away better than average. And I'm trying to think what would make it better. Because I do get some great sugars. I do get Barrell. I do get some fruit on there. There's definitely some cherry. And it's not medicinal cherry. It's more like a fresh cherry. There's actually multiple fruits I can get on this. I can get a cherry. I can also get some stone fruit on there too. There's some apple. So I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10 on pleasant versus off-putting. That may be a little bit low. But yeah, let's get into the flavor portion. I'm going to go for viscosity first, just because I think it'll be the easiest thing to pick up directly off the first sip. It's a velvety whiskey. You know, I've certainly had more syrupy whiskeys, especially from Barrell, but they do a great job in their blending of somehow everything being pretty viscous, pretty oily. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. And on finish, this is continuing to linger to this point. I'll say the finish is just really starting to die off now. It's still there a little bit. It's a high quality finish to a whiskey. There is a little bit of bitterness on the back end. That oaky bitterness does show on the very end of the palate, on the very end of the finish. And because of that, I'll go to a 7.5. As far as intensity of flavor, it's quite intense. It drinks, I would say, a little bit hotter than the 111, maybe upwards of 115, 118. And because it is cask strength, I'm not surprised by that. So I will give it a 9 out of 10 on intensity. So then we have complexity, we have balance, and then we have pleasant versus off-putting for flavor. I do think this is quite a complex whiskey. I do believe there are, of course, things more complex out there. But a lot of what I mentioned on the nose persists in the glass. So I mentioned how there's multiple different fruits, and there are hints of multiple different fruits on the palate as well. There's also caramel, there's brown sugar, there's a lot of oak. There's vanilla. There's a little bit of butterscotchy type thing going on. And because of that, I think I have to go with an 8 out of 10, maybe 8.5. 8.5 out of 10. The balance, I would say, is a little bit lower than the complexity. There is some bitterness that comes through at the very end, like I mentioned on the finish of the palate. That bitterness from the oak does throw it off a tiny bit. So I'm going to give this a 7.5 on balance. And then as far as pleasant versus off-putting, this is out of 10 as well. This is quite pleasant. You know, I mentioned the bitterness, but I kind of like a little bit of bitterness. I like knowing that if I'm drinking a whiskey that has some high age in the blend, that you know, it did sit in oak for 12 years or 15 years or whatever it is. And in general, I think this is one of the best batches from Barrell Craft Spirits that I've had ever, maybe. Now, I've never had any of the original batches, but I've had quite a few out of the 30s, and I've had one or two out of the 20s that they've come out with. And this is, in recent memory, my favorite one. It's a great sipping whiskey. It's great to sit down with and, you know, do something like this, a little academic exercise. And it's great to share with friends who have never tried Barrell and they want to know what it's about. I think this is a great opportunity to do that for somebody who also likes high proof whiskey. So for me, this is going to be another 8.5 out of 10. And you're going to have to give me a moment as I do math, because I am no mathematician. All right. And just did all the math. And Barrell Craft Spirits number 37, batch number 37, ends with a PTJ score of a 78. Hope you can't see my chicken scratch on there. But I think 78's a fantastic number. This is a pretty tough rubric. I played around with it with a few other bottles. And 78 is, you know, fairly high up there. And this is just the beginning, so, you know, maybe I change things around a little bit. Maybe I would add a point here or there looking back through it. You know, intensity on nose, I gave a 3.5. That probably should have been at least a 4. But yeah, 78. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe. I appreciate you watching. Cheers.